You know, folks, this is going to be a bit of a strange response to James Wolfe's latest AVGN video. But many of you probably know. If you don't know, I am a fan of James Wolfe, and especially the Angry Video Game Nerd character. And I do check out all the videos that get posted, either on the Cinemassacre side or here on YouTube. Which lately he has been posting the same video on both the Cinemassacre site and on YouTube almost on the same day. But you can probably see pretty much of this his response to latest AVGN episode entitled "Times Have Changed," or to AVGN 108, "Times Have Changed." And what I mean by that is he did basically a Halloween edition of an AVGN episode where he reviewed, I think it was Ghouls and Goblins or Ghosts and Goblins, I can't think of the name right now, and basically stating that it was one of the very first third-party games for the NES in its first few years, and stating that it's one of the hardest games to play, and if you think about, one of the trickiest, because initially if you watch the episode, you pretty much figured out, for those that have played the game and those that are probably thinking about it, that you literally have to pass the game twice. That's right. Instead of having, as he put it, 12 separate levels, you got to go through the same 6 levels a second time before you pass the game, thus making it one of the trickiest and hardest games of all. And even though it's known for introducing us to a underrated and underutilized Capcom icon character in Sir Arthur, who you could play as in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. To me, when I have to agree that it is kind of tricky and a little bit unfair that they would have you do this. But you got to remember, this is Capcom, a company that nowadays is kind of like, in some eyes, in some consumer, if not video gamers' eyes, is on thin ice when it comes to certain product material. So this shouldn't really come as much of a surprise. But this is Capcom we're talking about, who back then, and even in the SNES days, released Nintendo versions of Disney shows on video games. So they did some good things. We can't deny that. But when I talk about how times have changed, what I'm talking about literally is, when I look at this game that he reviewed, which he has described as one of the hardest games in NES history, third party or not, I think to myself, back then, because when I was watching this, I thought to myself, back then, you could play almost any NES, if not Sega Master System, if not Atari game, because of one reason. There was no ratings. That's right. Nowadays, you have ratings on just about every video game that's out there. Whether it's an Xbox 360, a PS3, a Wii, or an upcoming Wii U, a DS, a PlayStation Vita, 3DS, doesn't matter. You have basically a rating on everything. Even games that you initially can install and play on your PC and online, you literally have a rating for everything. But it got me thinking, man, if James's parents would have gotten him that game if it had a rating on it back then. Because in my initial reaction, when I look at this game, and I'm not just talking about this because I come from a Christian family, but it got me thinking, if they would have gotten him that game, if it had the rating that I think it probably would have had, of either T, if not possibly M, but more so T, makes me think. And my initial reaction is, if it was T, there's a slight chance they would have gotten it for him, maybe not. But if it had an M rating, I'm pretty sure it would have been like, nope, you ain't going to get that kind of game. Because back then you have to realize that maybe because of the villains, the characters, the creatures, the obstacles that Sir Arthur had to pass through in that game, it would make you think it probably would have gotten an M rating, maybe, all because of the bosses, like the last 3 bosses, the devil, Satan bosses, if you know what I mean. So I'm thinking it probably would have gotten an M rating, slightly. Maybe slightly would have gotten one. Maybe would have gotten a teen. Maybe would have gotten a T rating plus, a T plus rating on it. Just saying. But it made me think. But it made me ask myself if his parents would have gotten him that game, and if the rating system was instituted back then. My initial reaction is M rating. I don't think so. T rating. Maybe T plus rating, possibly. Just ignore that. That's another political advertisement. I don't know why. I'm getting sick and tired of them. But anyway, getting back on subject here. I think it would have been different. I think it would have been more of a different situation. I think it would have been more of a different situation, if you will, because hold on for a second. My dog's trying to go out, but I think she wants to go out for different reasons. Give her a biscuit, then that'll keep her busy. She likes to go out and go around the house and dig at something, I don't know. But my point I'm trying to make is, I think if it would have had a T rating, if not a T plus, it would have been, probably would have been like kind of back and forth on getting it for him. M rating, not so much. Because you got to think of some of the NES games that came out back then. Some of the third-party movie licensed games and stuff. Like say Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. Those probably would have gotten M ratings right off the bat. Back to the Future, I would say probably would get an E10 rating. And again, this is all depending on this all goes back to the title up there, how times have changed. Because if the rating system was instituted back then, you know, there are certain games that I'm definitely telling you right now, he probably still would be reviewing, but would probably be reviewing them at a much later date, if you know what I mean. I mean, take a look at, like, say, Tiny Toons and Rescue Rangers. These would have gotten E ratings right off the bat. Kung Fu would have gotten an E10 rating. But it was when the rating system came about, for anybody that doesn't know, it came about because games like these were being introduced back in the early to mid-90s. Mortal Kombat games. Fighter games, Street Fighter. Those games were being introduced into the Nintendo system at the time, into the SNES, Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx, 3DO, Jaguar, Neo Geo. They were all being introduced into the system. I mean, into home console purchasing. Being introduced into home console purchasing. That is why the ratings came around. Now, I think there was also an incident, I'm not really sure, but I think there was some kind of an incident where this all kind of happened, if you know, or was the reason for it as well. But I think it was mostly because of the realism that games like Mortal Kombat had and the violence. Because basically, the Mortal Kombat games, let's face it, they changed the perspective of video gaming, especially when it came to fighter games. It wasn't your Street Fighter games anymore. These weren't, as the old saying goes, these weren't your grandpa's games, your grandparents' games, or your parents' games. These were up the ass, straight in your face, whatever kind of games. And that's why the rating system came into being. But you got to say to yourself, if the rating system, but again, thinking, if the rating system, what would have happened if the rating system was instituted back when Ghosts and Goblins came out? Makes you think. It makes you really think. I mean, and again, I'm not talking about this as coming from a Christian family, because I'll tell you honestly, if my mom would have known, would have seen me or my sisters playing a game like Ghosts and Goblins, or Friday the 13th, or Nightmare on Elm Street, she would take the game, literally, she would take the game, and she would go, whoosh, she would, whee, toss it out the window. Or, if she would have seen maybe our dad letting us rent a game like that, she would basically have my dad and have us drive back to the store and say, no, I want to exchange this for a different rental. Not saying she would have, but more so, being raised the way we were, it probably would have been that kind of, it would have been initially that kind of reaction. Because basically she doesn't like that kind of stuff. I mean, to give you an example, we had my nephews here the other weekend, and my 5-year-old nephew, who obviously is almost into anything, is not scared of much, obviously, brought a skull, basically a Halloween display skull that they had, him and my sister and her husband had, brought it with him. And then my mom, when he's hanging out with his cousin, my 8-year-old nephew, when he's hanging out with him, he's basically, my mom basically takes the skull, she gives it to me and say, put this in your room or put it somewhere where it's not in my room. Because she doesn't want it, because of a past experience. You see, my dad used to own one of those skull masks for Halloween. She never liked it. She had a nightmare about it going after her. She wakes up, opens up wonders why she had that nightmare, looks under the bed, or looks in between the bed, and there's the skull. She tosses my dad's skull mask. So, but anyway, that's why I truly believe that if she would have seen me and my sisters playing a game like Ghosts and Goblins, or games like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, or any kind of games back then, ratings or not, she would have basically either drove back to the store, had us get another game, or she would have tossed it. Be honest with you. She would have. And again, it shows you how much times have changed. Because even when Atari was around, and they were still kind of irrelevant, very relevant, and people would ask and wonder, hey, do you got any games that are for older audience or more mature adults and stuff? Literally, you would have an attendant or a cashier go into the back or go under the desk and pull out or bring out leather-cased Atari games. Atari games in leather cases. And why? Because these were the adult games. And if you don't believe me, go to Cinemassacre.com, check out Atari Porn by AVGN. He did a review on it, one of his most noteworthy ones. But again, it just shows you how much times have changed. But I ask you, what do you think? Do you think James's parents would have gotten him that game when the NES came out if the rating system was instituted back then, or not? Tell me what you guys think. I know this was a strange, kind of unusual way to respond to his video, but let me know what you guys think, because it got me thinking. I mean, the rating system, let's face it, is there for a reason. I mean, my older sister does not want her 8-year-old son playing M-rated games. Let's put it that way. But let me know what you guys think down below. Comment, video response if you like. Very much appreciated if you did. And I'll talk to y'all later.